my name is Raseen Khwais. It's spelled Raseel Khwais. I'm a Syrian here with Students for Justice for Palestine. We're here starting an encampment that we just set up today. That we started so that we ask ISU to disclose its investments, and if there's any relation with any of investments that have to do with Israel and the funding of Israel and funding of the genocide in Palestine, that we divest that money so that we no longer fund that because we don't agree with that morally, ethically. And now we're also asking that ISU make an official statement calling for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza.
So are you aware of any ISU investments that do directly support Israel?
We currently know that ISU has a partnership with Caterpillar because there's an auditorium named for Caterpillar on campus, and Caterpillar is the company that supplies bulldozers that we know have bulldozed homes in Gaza and the West Bank. And so that's the first iteration that there's a relationship there with companies that support Israel. But the rest of it is why we're asking for disclosure, because there isn't much transparency when it comes to what ISU is funding, and we would like to know where tuition is going. We'd like to know if we agree with it or not, just the same way as we would always ask for transparency with where our taxes are going. We would always ask for transparency with any money we're donating as well. It's just, we don't have a choice in whether or not we pay tuition. We'd like to have a choice with where our tuition goes.
Yeah, and so tell me what all the demands of the organizations are. You have a small little encampment, more and more people are showing up. What are all the demands that the organization has?
Our current demands are that ISU disclose all its funding practices, and that if any funding goes to any companies affiliated with Israel, that we divest from those investments, and that we ask ISU to form an official statement asking for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza.
Okay, and how have communications with ISU gone so far regarding that?
We have been met with a lot of silence from ISU. When we first applied to be an RSO on campus, which is a student organization, we just didn't hear back, even though we went through all the process of becoming an RSO. Once we became affiliated with the national organization of Students for Justice for Palestine and got signatures to prove that we were also affiliated with them, we did not get any response from ISU accepting us as an RSO. In fact, earlier we had been reserving a room to hold our meetings in, our informational meetings and such. And then after a while, last minute, before one of our meetings, we were informed that we can no longer reserve a room because we weren't an official RSO, even though we hadn't been given a chance to be. And at that point, we had to go through other organizations that have been helping us out to reserve that room. So we have been met with dead silence from ISU. We've signed a letter now asking for the disclosure of where the funding is going, and still nothing. That's why we've formed the encampment, because we've got to make our voices heard. If we aren't hearing response, maybe we can force one.
And were you finally able to get student organization status?
No.
No. So have they given you any specific reason why they're refusing?
Dead silence.
Dead silence. Okay.
At least as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. So I noticed on your Instagram account that you guys made a post saying that I don't know if it was an individual organization that accused you guys of being anti-Semitic. Do you know what the organization was that did that?
It was, it stemmed from a post by a Jewish organization on campus. I cannot remember its specific name right now, but it did, in vague terms, imply that we were being anti-Semitic, in terms that it said that there had been an increase of anti-Semitic behavior right after one of our rallies took place, where all we had done was call for freedom in Palestine and call for disclosure and divestment. That's all we had done. And still, they had called it anti-Semitic to do so, and they voiced their support for Israel within that post as well. And although we usually didn't want to respond to that sort of criticism because we didn't see that it held any merit since it was in bad faith, we decided to in that case, because we hadn't done an official post stating our case that we were for Jewish support, that we called for ceasefire for the benefit of also Jewish hostages who were being held in Gaza and still being affected by the indiscriminate bombing in Gaza by the Israeli state. So with that, we wanted to just put a formal statement out there to just close the door on that so that we wouldn't have to respond to any further comments about us being anti-Semitic or such.
Yeah. And so what is your current understanding of the situation in Gaza right now, or in any of the annexed territories?
My understanding is, on a historical perspective, pretty thorough. I've been keeping up with the numbers that have been going down, with 35,000 as of yesterday that I checked killed in Gaza, with many people missing, and many of them children. I have an understanding of what's going on in Gaza because of my cultural ties, me being an Arab. With my friendship ties, I have a lot of Palestinian friends, and also being an Arab. We're just interconnect in our Arab enclaves.
Also, most of the people in the Golan Heights are Syrians.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's another annexed territory that a lot of people forget about. Is what's going on in the Golan.
I have some family there, though distant, so I don't keep much in contact.
Yeah, but they're directly in the annexed Golan Heights.
Yes.
Okay.
And so it's a matter of deep importance to keep up on the issue, so I've been keeping up personally in the news. We also have a document that we share with the rest of the organization, with the rest of anybody who is in our chats, in our groupies, with constant updates on situations in Gaza. So we try to keep ourselves informed.
And how big is the Palestinian population in ISU, if you're aware of it or anything?
From what I'm aware of, not very large. That being said, we have been in communication with plenty of Palestinian people outside of the ISU campus who live nearby, plenty of Palestinian people who I see, plenty of Palestinian people who just know from all the different cultures we hail from. And so they're all in support. And the Palestinian folks who have come in support to join us in the encampment are here and loud and proud of what we're doing.
And do you ever think that sometimes the assertion that Palestinians have a right to exist or should exist is inherently seen by some as anti-Semitic?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. There is...
So merely asserting that Palestinians do and should have a right to exist is seen by some people as somehow against Jewish people.
Because of the fact that they're in Palestine and Israel has laid claim to that territory, and clearly so many people are okay with any means of forcing them out. So the inherent thought that Palestinians exist, because so many people believe that territory doesn't belong to them, that Palestine is not a real state, makes it almost an insult to even name them Palestinians, which is a damn shame.
And so you guys set this up, today? This specific encampment this morning, around noon. And how long do you guys plan on staying? Because there's like finals next week, and then like class is over. So how long do you plan on staying out here?
Plenty of people until finals. I plan to stick around until finals, coming in and out of the dorms, but also when I can, staying here. We know plenty of people have brought their laptops, brought camping supplies, and plan to stay here overnight for weeks to come. And we know a few people have already committed to, if not within this encampment, find somewhere to also advocate for Palestinian freedom over the summer. So there are still going to be advocates on campus or near it in Normal who will be still advocating for Palestine long after the majority of students have went and gone home.
What has been your communication regarding the encampment with ISU administration or campus police or anything like that?
We kept it very quiet up until this morning, which is why not many people heard about this happening. We kept internal planning kind of small within smaller groups that we very highly trusted, at which point just this morning we released the information to our larger SJP group, and then as of right before noon, we posted all our calls to action on social media, and this is a turnout from just that, from a call to action at noon when we set up the encampment. Yeah. So it's really been a great turnout.
And it's only 4 o'clock right now, so most classes aren't even, they aren't even out yet.
Most classes end at 5.
And so what do you think, what is the type of ceasefire that you're looking to see?
A permanent end to the bombing, the indiscriminate and cruel bombing of civilians in Gaza, because they are civilians. We know for a fact that the majority of people killed in Palestine have been civilians, and that Israel hasn't given much care about that. In the long run, it's hard to say what a solution would look like, and we are not in a position to look at that at the moment. All we're calling for is disclosure and divestment, because it's such a large issue with such a lack of support from mainstream media, from the U.S. government, that right now we're trying to make as much of an impact as we can, and that's unfortunately a very large.
Right. No,
Yeah, so you mentioned an end to the bombing, an end to the immediate warfare. What about there's 100 hostages, Israeli hostages that Hamas or other militants have, and there's basically 9,500 Palestinian hostages that Israel has. Yeah, about 3,660 have not been shot. They're basically in indefinite detention. So, are those part of the demands for a ceasefire?
Absolutely, that comes with the territory. I mean, for both ends of hostages, any civilian casualty, any civilian harm is never encouraged, is never good. It's just not good. No innocent person should ever be harmed in the process of war, even if it happens. And I mourn for hostages on both ends. I obviously mourn the Palestinian people and the helplessness that they face today. And I mourn for how frightened Israeli hostages must be. I have so much sympathy for that. And at the same time, I have this separation in my brain between Israeli civilians and Israeli government. And it's a very stark difference. And we also can't ignore the prejudice that exists in Israel that also needs to be disbanded over the next few decades for any sort of peace negotiations to even begin.
Yeah. So your request for a ceasefire includes a release of hostages on both sides. What is your response or opinions, or the group's response or opinions on the Al-Aqsa flood on October 7th?
We have not discussed that, and since I'm speaking for an organization, I don't feel comfortable discussing.
Okay. What is the organization's opinions of Hamas? Are they good stewards of the Gazan people? What do you think? What is your opinions on Hamas? They're often labeled as a terrorist organization. They were obviously accused of committing terrorist acts during the Al-Aqsa flood.
Right.
Do you have any statements regarding that? Because you mentioned earlier that you distinguish between the government of Israel and citizens. Yeah.
I need to be very careful in the territory I tread, not because I am not confident in the opinions I have, but rather because of how the media portrays any discussions surrounding Hamas that don't involve straight, non-sequitur, non-nuanced condemnations, blanket, and without historical context behind it.
Yeah.
Of course, Hamas's actions are cruel and unjustified in many, many, many ways. At the same time, we cannot ignore the 75 years of history that have led to a very familiar round of extremism, of anger. And I think while we condemn Hamas and its actions, we have to also take into account the historical context in which Hamas came to exist. And the real way to disband Hamas is not by the indiscriminate bombing of innocent civilians in Gaza. It is by the dismantling of prejudice and the uniting of people who have more in common throughout history than they do apart.
I just heard some discussion with a student about the phrase, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and there are many Zionists or people on the Israel side that believe that's a Jewish exterminationist phrase. What is your opinion on that, or what that phrase actually means to you and to the organization?
As we were discussing, from the river to the sea, to me, is the freedom of the Palestinian people, not in regards of the mass exodus of Jewish people in the region, but rather in that there will be a ceasefire of violence, but also of discrimination. That they will be free to roam their lands as they please, without the apartheid regime that Israel placed for 75 years upon them, free to roam the streets the generations of their ancestry have lived upon, free to the land that their ancestors have cultivated, to the houses that they've built, to the families that they've had there. So a ceasefire, so from the river to the sea, to me, isn't let's get the Zionists completely out, nobody needs to stay there, it's just a Palestinian state for Arabs alone. Not at all. For me, where we stand right now, it means peace. It means freedom for people who have been under discrimination, under apartheid, under bombings, under unsafe rule, under humiliation, for decades, under mass exodus, for decades. People stripped of their homes, of their identities, for decades. It means that they finally get to go home. That's all it means to me. I'm not even considering the Zionists into the equation of from the river to the sea. I'm just considering the plight of the Palestinian and their right to human decency and equity.
And what do you understand Zionism to be and to mean?
Zionism to me is the support of the Israeli state and the support of their efforts to disband the Palestinian state. That's what Zionism means to me. I don't count every person who lives in Israel as a Zionist. In fact, we know that there are thousands of people in Israel right now protesting Netanyahu and the actions he has taken. I don't count them as Zionists. What I count as Zionists are people in support of the regime of Netanyahu, of the support of the regime of the Israeli government, and the support of what they're doing to Palestine.
And you said earlier that you believe Israel is an apartheid state. Can you kind of explain that more?
We understand the definition of apartheid state by a state that takes action against a certain ethnic or race group to disband their freedoms to an extent that affects their livelihoods. We know for a fact that Palestinians have been barred from certain streets long before October 7th. That Palestinians have been barred from job opportunities, that Palestinians have been required further identification to enter certain sectors that their families have hailed from. We know for a fact that there have been freedoms barred from the Palestinian people after Israel came to occupy the region. So, by definition, I have a hard time not calling Israel an apartheid state long before October 7th.
So, and you might just want to answer this personally or whatever, the calls against Israel are specifically a call to dismantle the apartheid system, not the actual state in itself.
Yes, of course people have different ideas of what should happen
Yeah,
in the end.
Yeah.
Of course, I can't speak for the organization for this. Again, we're calling simply for the disclosure of where the funding is going and divestment of that funding if it's going to Israel. What I can speak on is that there can't be freedom and peace when discrimination is present. There just isn't a way.
So one thing that the other side might say is, look, there's 22% of the Israeli population is Arab. They're actually descended from Palestinians, but the Israeli government doesn't call them Palestinians, they call them Arabs. And the other side will say, well, they have complete and total equal rights, so where is the apartheid existing? Do you have a response to that?
Well, they don't have totally equal rights. We know that certain exceptions do arise when certain people convert to Judaism, for example, or if certain people hail from certain families, or if there are certain monetary incentives for certain families. But we know on a large scale there is rampant discrimination, and that is hard to defy when we see those lines so clearly marked between territories of where certain people can move, where certain people can live.
Viewers at home to know about what's going on here and what your guys' future plans are.
I think it's important for viewers to know that it wasn't with absolute certainty that we started Encampment. We didn't know how many people would show up. We didn't know how many people would gain support. We didn't know how many people would come out against us. And there has been some people against us in social media, but by and large, there has been support. There's been a lot of people who've offered donations and supplies. And we weren't certain of that, and we still chose to start what we started. And I think no matter what, there needs to be a step taken when injustice is found. And it's never easy and it's never certain. And at the same time, nothing that anybody else calls us, whether it be anti-Semitic, whether it be annoying, I know a lot of people have called us that because of our chants on campus, really changes the goal of what we're trying to achieve, which is basic human decency for a whole ethnic group, for a whole population that have been struggling for so long. And there's no amount of police response, there's no amount of social response that should ever scare you from keeping your voice loud.
Yeah, and just to be clear, you guys are putting this on without the permission of the university, and you've experienced intense resistance by the university to even allow you guys to basically exist as a pro-Palestinian movement. So you're doing this with kind of maximum well, not quite maximum yet, but definitely a lot of discrimination from the university, because they refuse to recognize you as an organization, and they refuse. They're technically allowing this for now, but you guys, they didn't give you permission to do this, etc. So, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, we haven't met a response as severe as in Columbia, Vanderbilt, or all those different universities that faced mass arrests in police buses, which I totally condemn. But there is a certain risk we're taking. Certainly me, who's putting my face and name on every news reporter that's coming by here, whether it be leftist, whether it be just a local news report. So I'm very well aware of the risk that I'm taking. I'm aware of the risk it poses towards my higher education. I'm aware of the risk it poses towards any future career plans. And still, we're here. And again, I think when there's a cause that is so blatantly, clearly in the right, there shouldn't be anything that stops you from speaking.
And are you guys prepared to, if there's more repression from the university, if they try and get the police involved, if they try and get rid of the encampment? What are your guys' plans for that, if you're willing to share them?
We have phone numbers for folks who are willing to help with legal if anybody's arrested. We have people who are willing to keep on donating, to keep on providing supplies if things are taken away. We have people providing more tents if the tents are taken away. We have plans in action. We hope we don't need to use them. We hope ISU doesn't retaliate by any means. But if they do, we are prepared to face it. There are plenty of folks here who are willing to get arrested for the cause.
Yeah, and I can show the encampments a little bit later. You guys aren't blocking anybody from moving. You guys are completely peaceful, non-violent.
Noise and chalk on the sidewalk.
Yeah, so, all right, well, thank you so much for the interview. Thank you everyone at home watching Agitation Rising, and we will keep updating on this story.
Thank you.